It is well understood that the COVID-19 epidemic has dramatically influenced the global economy, and the US and Mexican thrifts are no exception. Yet the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on illegal economies, comprising its impact on standardized crime in Mexico, is lesser known but equally significant. The unpredictable nature of how long it will take to expand a vaccine for COVID-19 or for neighborhoods to develop herd immunity means that evaluating the impact of the pandemic on systematic corruption is hard. COVID-19 related disturbances of allowance, chains of systematic crime, are likely to lead to a growth of hunting activities, such as kidnapping and cheating for smaller organized crime groups. An amplification of prevailing trends. Huger organized crime groups in Mexico will likely use information warfare to win the spirits and minds of locals to support their criminal businesses and to weaken the lawfulness of the Mexican administration. Will also likely have the capacity to further expand their unions and capitalize on undermined local traffickers, such as the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, CGNG, to broaden their possession of influence. Comprehensive drug supply chain disturbances could permit local cheating company models, though many drug markets are likely to revise and shorten drug supply chain logistics where feasible. Also, data from April 2020, 1 month after lockdown started up in Mexico, suggests that violence will begin again its slow increase, with 2.2% increase in killings in the first quarter of 2020, correlated to the same period in 2019. Entirely, we foresee that the COVID-19 pandemic will have harsh consequences on organized crime in Mexico, and policymakers and law enforcement agents in both the US and Mexico will need to revise their techniques for fighting such crime consequently. COVID-19 has had fluctuating effects on the drug trafficking supply chain, the people dealing with the supply chain in source countries and transit nations, and the market side of the equation, particularly at the US-Mexico border and in the continental US, to fully understand how COVID-19 has affected the world of narcotics trafficking in the US and Mexico. It is crucial to study the drug trafficking business cycle, which comprises several important nodes, namely capitalization, output, transport, diffusion, and recapitalization of the investment. The significant nodes of creation and carrier are affected by two key factors. The first is landscape, or where the critical activity is happening. China's role in the supply chain, for example, is significant. Consider the fact that China is a key supplier of important precursor chemicals for Mexican drug producers, and the lockdowns related to COVID-19 in China could impact supply chains. China has existence at several Mexican deepwater ports that process intermodal shipments, ship, rail, truck. China, like several other nations including the United States, is also coming to be nationalist on trade issues associated with personal defensive equipment and chemicals related to possible COVID-19 treatments. Another main factor involving the production and transportation nodes is demographics, or how the people executing the activity on both the supply and pressure sides. On the other hand, traffickers are at risk of leasing and spreading the COVID-19 virus, but will likely not stop their actions. Affliction to or among traffickers due to contact with drugs or packaging is less likely than person-to-person contact. And even though the toll on human life that COVID-19 may take on people in any country, drugs will continue to move in sizable amounts. For example, on or around March 31, 2020, a San Diego multi-agency tunnel task force invaded 1,300 pounds of cocaine, 86 pounds of methamphetamine, 17 pounds of heroin, 3,000 pounds of marijuana, and more than 2 pounds of fentanyl, 15 in a tunnel that opened in the Otay Mesa Bureau of California. To say that COVID-19 shifts everything is already a cliche, but it is also true. The pandemic is worsening tension between China and the United States. accelerating the digitization of commerce and glowing a bright light on the imbalances that divide our societies. It is also accelerating stunning knock-on impacts in the criminal underworld. After a quick lull in homicidal violence in some countries, there are signs that it is rising once more. Meanwhile, crime groups are departing online to where the action is. If left to their tools, they could make the world a more dangerous place to live. In an attack on a rehabilitation center, 24 people were killed by anonymous gunmen amid reasonable gang violence rampant in north-central Mexico. The authorities announced this news with shock. According to the report by police, the attack in the city of Irapuato, Guanajuato State actually wounded 7 people, with 3 of them in very critical condition. Despite the intention of the attack being unclear, Governor Diego Shinho Rodriguez Vallejo said it was highly likely to be another illustration of the gang violence. I deeply regret and condemn the events in Irapuato this afternoon, the governor wrote on that Wednesday. The violence caused by organized crime not only takes the lives of the young, but it takes the peace from families in Guanajuato. The drug cartels continue to strengthen a strong and lethal clutch at the time when the country is grappling with the novel coronavirus, which has killed more than lakhs of people and infected over people across the nation. The government under ex-President Felipe Calderon began aggressively fighting cartel groups in 2006, wishing to suppress their influence by targeting their leaders. Back in 2019, it was estimated that 45,000 military troops and federal and state police were fighting the so-called war on drugs. Since the industry began, an estimated 200,000 people have died or disappeared due to cartel violence. How did the government respond to this particular case? After several years of violence and struggles under the war on drugs, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador vowed to change the story. During his campaign, he said the government should not protest violence with violence. Instead, he needed to take a more powerful, peaceful approach. He said, "You cannot fight fire with fire. We do not want deaths. We do not want a war." However, experts have since condemned Obrador for similarly aggressive moves, illustrating the fact that he sent the army to catch the cartel leader and created the privileged National Guard Police Division. Los Zetas is a Mexican criminal monopoly. It is considered as one of the most riskiest of Mexico's drug cartels. They are known for committing brutal, violent shock and awe tactics, such as beheadings, distress, and indiscriminate massacre. Many nations witnessed declines in some types of crime and increases in others shortly after the imposition of social distancing and lockdowns to slow down the virus. In much of North America and Western Europe, for example, murder and violent attacks plummeted as people stayed at home. On the other hand, reported domestic abuse and sexual violence erupted. Predictably, the imprisonment of people in their homes increased exposure to some harsh partners. Some of the world's most violent nations recorded dramatic drops in violent crimes. U.S. cities such as Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York experienced stunning declines in robbery and rape. El Salvador, routinely ranked among the most harmful countries, saw homicides drop from 114 in February to 65 in March. South Africa, known as the continent's crime capital, reported just 94 homicides in the first few weeks of lockdown, with 326 during the same period the year before. Although welcome, these safety improvements could be fleeting. Physical distancing, curfews, and shelter-in-place orders are not preventing drug cartels, gangs, and militias. On the contrary, a mixture of police shortages and supplements and demand shocks in the drug market is accelerating fresh waves of violence, particularly in Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico, where criminal groups are fighting over a diminishing pie. The breakdown in security also occurs compounded by the early release of inmates from the region's notoriously violent prisons, some of whom are already resolving the old records. Hope you guys like this video. This is another phase of the pandemic we all need to know, which was experienced by most people in the world, sacrificed their lives, As we always say, narcotics are an infectious business. It kills lives. Mention your views in the comments section below. Please make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on such content. See you in the next video. Until then,